Well, good morning. How are you all today? Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. Well, there's a lot going on, isn't there? Uh, a lot of craziness, and the crazier it gets, it increases our understanding that we need to be separate from the system. That's what I want to talk today about, separating from the system. Um, I've said before that I believe that this country is going to have to fracture. It can't continue the way that it is, and it won't after a certain point. Who knows what point that will be, but we will talk about that. I took yesterday off. I hope you all had a good weekend, by the way. We had a big weekend. Our daughter's 14th birthday, and had a big party, and all the things that go along with that. And then yesterday was kind of a rainy day, and I got to writing on the latest book, and I just got to writing and getting into the book, and I wasn't feeling making a video about it. I didn't want to get out of the book and start talking about the craziness of the world, because in my books, those of you who have read them know that I deal with the craziness, but I deal with them. I deal with it, right? So we're not always going back and forth and going, what next, uh, but the thing out in Coeur d'Alene, interesting. They have gotten more information on that kid, 20-year-old kid, Russian orphan apparently, had some issues, had some problems. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but now they're coming out and saying that he was into all this furry stuff, and he was what do they call that? A brony? My Little Pony, consumed with My Little Pony. Our our country, our world, has just collapsed as far as standard, values and expectations, and the ability to pass these on to future generations, and all these things that are happening are the result of that. And then we have the commie up there that won the Democrat primary for the mayor of New York, Mom Donnie, who came out and admitted, and many Americans probably won't have seen this, and even when they do, they'll gloss over it, but he admitted that that they need to develop socialism, and he wants to take over the means of production. He wants government control of the means of production. This is classic Karl Marx. Most of our population doesn't understand the full implication of that. And as a result, I don't think that there's any hope for this country continuing as the country that we've known it. And so it's important that we be able to separate from that system so that we're not sucked down with it, and then prepare to be able to restart something, whether that's in different areas, geographical areas, whether it's a separation of the non-cities from the cities. Who knows what it's going to be like, and it'd take me a couple of hours to get into how those things might be accomplished, and many of you have your own ideas about that as well. But I don't have any desire to keep going on, the way our country is going, and to have my kids and grandkids going through there. And I think many of you feel the same way. Now, when I talk about separating from, you know what? This might be a good time, because I write about this in my second book, and I'm going to just toss this in. If I could put you on pause for just a moment, it'll seem like a microsecond to you, because I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. It didn't seem like long to you, right? I want to read just a couple of paragraphs, a speech that Jim Wyatt, the main character, gives in my second book, The Revival, and then we'll jump off from there. He said, many of us have said, and this is after a total collapse of everything. CME wipes out the world, right? Now they're rebuilding. He says, many of us have said that the country we grew up in had ceased to exist long before the collapse. The America that valued liberty, virtue, morality, hard work, and self-reliance had devolved into a semi-socialist state of coddled, dependent, incompetent, politically correct crybabies who were offended by anything with which they disagreed, and who, by their sheer numbers and political influence, were able to stifle and control the producing class, which had done most of the work to support them, consequently driving our once great country into chaotic decline. Right? He continues, the collapse returned us to a reset point, a point from which it may be possible to rebuild the America we once knew. Whether we will be able to do this will depend on a number of things, some of which will be beyond our control. But we must concentrate on and dedicate our efforts to those areas over which we do have control. We must build the future we want our children to live in. Okay, well, we're living in a world right now that hasn't necessarily experienced that kind of collapse, but we're experiencing a slow collapse, a slow cultural collapse, a slow collapse, and some would say not so slow, of values and standards and expectations and things like that. And so to prepare for that, or to separate ourselves from that, we have to understand what's going on, and I think most of you all do. And we also have to accept the fact that, you know, without the hand of the good Lord in it, it's probably going to continue to devolve, our society continue to devolve more and more and more. And then the choice is, with each of us, or do we want to continue to ride that pig down into the ditch, or do we want to separate ourselves from it, jump off, and you know, go our own way and do our own thing, so that when it finally does go down, we won't be down there in the ditch with that dead pig ourselves. And of course, that brings with it several, some challenges. Okay. Now, when I talk about separating ourselves from the system, what I really mean now, and you know, many of you are familiar with the concept of going galt, right? If you've read Atlas Shrugged, the greatest book, in my opinion, ever written, you know, except the Bible, you know what going galt means. And if you haven't read it, I suggest that you do. I tell people it's not a book, it's a life-changing environment, a life-changing experience. But the whole idea with that was John Galt decided he didn't want to participate in supporting the system anymore. And so I won't tell you the story, you need to read it. And so he stepped outside of it. He stopped supporting the system. I have done that myself a couple times in my life. But it was easier when I was single. It's not so easy to do when you're married and have kids who depend on you, because to be honest, not everything in this world is horrible, regardless of what some people would have you believe. There are a lot of great things about this world. You know, the people in it. There's a lot of great people in this world. There are many opportunities. There are many things that make this world a great place, which is why I don't, you know, some people say, you know, run out and live in the woods, and I don't, you know, because we have so many great things that we have under the guidance and will of God, that we have created. We have built community and societies that really, there's a lot of good there. Okay. But those societies are, like I say, devolving. And so we have to be able to control the extent to which they control us. Okay? And so when I'm talking about separating from the system, I'm not talking about run out and live somewhere, you know, in the woods. If you want to, I mean, that's fine. A lot of people do prefer that. Some people don't. More people don't. But whatever it is you do, what you need to do is separate yourself from dependence on the system. Okay? So that no matter what happens, you've insulated yourself from the negative consequences of whatever goes on. Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see an increase in the idiocy in our politics, like this Mamdani up in New York. We simply don't have a um, a voting, a citizenry who as a whole is intelligent enough and informed enough to understand what's happening. Simple as that. When you have an informed citizenry, um, you know, things tend to work out. If you don't, then you have the wackos, in charge and leading it, and the morons will just follow along behind, and they are the danger. They are the things that support the collapse. So, how do you do that? How do you separate yourself from dependence on the system? Well, you just go back to the basics of preparedness. The basics of preparedness tell you what you need in order to survive. You can go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever, but it's a matter of food, water, shelter, um, you know, the ability to take care of yourself. Some people will get into it medically, yeah, to an extent but I mean, we knew people back, the older generations that lived into their 90s never went to a doctor, you know. So yeah, they were able to patch themselves up and things like that. But people in defense, those are the basic things. And so when I talk about separating yourself from dependence on the system, that's what I mean. Do you have all those things? It doesn't matter where you live. It matters on how much you need the system on a daily basis to provide for your needs. Okay. Now, and that's dangerous when you rely on anybody else to provide for your needs. That's different than wants. But if you rely on anybody else or any system to provide for your needs, you've made yourself their slave. Okay? I mean, we can rely on the good Lord, right? We can rely on our parents, hopefully. Most of us could, some couldn't. We can depend on friends if they are real friends. We can depend on our family if they are, if they are dependable. If they're not, then we can't. But if we rely on anybody else to provide for our needs, we have diminished our own independence. And then we've put ourselves at the mercy of those people or systems, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I say separate yourself from the system. I don't mean don't go to restaurants anymore. I don't mean don't go to the state fair. I don't mean don't go take a trip. I don't mean don't go to the doctor or the dentist, if you need them, or to the dealer if you need your car worked on. Most of us don't want to work on our cars, even if we could. So to a certain extent, we're still going to participate in the system. But the thing is, when it comes down to real survival, how much do you need on a daily basis the system to provide those basic things? And the extent to which you can reduce those things, well, then your independence increases, right? Makes sense, doesn't it? Well, our country is, I'm going to show you in a minute how I suggest you do all this. As our country continues to fragment, and I think it will fragment into several sections, I'm not going to say that well, many people are saying that they feel a civil war is coming. Others believe it will be a revolution. There's a difference between those two. It's not something to talk about, getting all excited about. It's something that if it does come, and I think there's a probability, it's something to think seriously about. Because I don't want to get excited about. I don't get excited about much. Ask my wife. It's nothing to get excited about or fearful about. It's something to accept the probability of, or even the possibility, if that's the camp you're in, and do some serious thinking and do some serious planning and preparing for. Okay, because when the day comes, when that happens, the day for preparation is over. I mean, there's still some things you can do, but the real days for preparing is over. The days to separate yourself from the influence of the system and the impact of the system's craziness that's done. So think about it. Think about it. Start now. Now, if you live in the country, make sure that you're doing the things that you could. Make sure that you are prepared. I know too many people who live in the country, even those who consider themselves preppers because they live a more rural life or a preparedness-minded person, who still aren't quite as prepared as they ought to be in order to provide real separation and independence from the system. So if you live out in the country and you're doing some farming and everything like that, that's great. I mean, you're in good shape. I hope that you also have all those other items in place, because there's a tendency on the part of many that if they're really prepared in one area, they tend not to see the importance of other areas. So try not to do that. Okay. If you live in the city, well, still you can separate yourself from depending on the system. Except for food. And even in the city, I know people in the city have big gardens and pretty much can feed themselves. I know people in the city have bigger gardens than people in the country. Okay, so it's really not a matter of where you live at this point. If you live in the city, though, I would suggest that you give it some thought on having a secondary location, someplace where you can go if everything falls apart. Because the cities themselves, and I'm not talking about the suburbs. Okay, here again, too many people confuse that. People who don't live in the suburbs of the cities think that the suburbs are the cities. Not at all. But there are some suburbs that are like the cities. Okay, there's good and there's bad in every situation. Just like there's good small towns and bad small towns. But have a plan for having the ability to go to an alternate location, because when things do start to fall apart, the cities are going to be the powder kegs. Okay, you don't want to be there. You want, do you have, Uncle Bob? Do you have someplace, a relative or someplace you can go and stay with them? Do you have a part of your circle of friends that, they've got 20 acres and you can, put your camper or your tent on it and whatever? Do you have another location? Ideally. And this is something that I suggest people work towards, and it's something that I think a lot of people get irritated when I talk about, because they say, well, not everybody can do that. Well, okay. A lot of people can, okay, and that is have a second place, have a country house, have a lake house, have another place that you own that you can go to, and have that place stocked. Now if you're too far out in the country, those places get broken into all the time. There's a lot more crime out in the country than most people think. So you have to have an eye on security. Neighbors, alarms, cameras, whatever. And even at that, I had a guy that I knew that wanted me to do run some security alarms and lights for him and things. I didn't do it because I was getting out of the business at the time and I didn't have time. But he was just always getting broken. They were stealing him blind all the time. He'd go out there and he'd restock it. Next time he'd check, it'd all be gone again. He was essentially just buying stuff for other people, right? So if you have a place out in the country that you're not living in all the time, be aware of the need for pretty strong security. But you should, and if you have a place, matter of fact, I just got done talking to a guy not long ago. He had inherited some land from a family. He said, what do you think I should do with it? And I said, well, first thing, go out there and plant a bunch of fruit. I said, are you going to live on it? Are you going to? Well, he said he'd like to build something like Stonemont. I'll tell you about Stonemont in a minute. And because he'd read all my books. And I said, well, first thing I suggest you do. He said, but I'm still, a couple of years out from building. I said, well, first thing you do, go out and plant a bunch of fruit trees and a bunch of berries. Get them going. And then put out a bunch of perennial vegetables. Get them started. Because you don't have to be there for those things, right? And you'll see which ones, some of them won't produce, a lot of them will. So essentially you're starting to grow your own food before you even get out there. So think about that. If you don't have a place outside the built up areas, think about buying a place. If there's a building on it, great, you got a good start. If there's not, well, it's your opportunity to build from nothing, right? takes money and time. But get out there and start planting things. Plant fruit trees and berry bushes and, blackberries, raspberries. Blueberries don't do well around here. I've never had any luck with them. All sorts of things. And they will just grow, especially blackberries. They will grow like you can't believe. You just leave them alone. You go out there, midsummer, starting getting into the fall, and you will just have tons of food hanging off the trees. Apples, peaches don't do that well around here. They might do well where you go, but still plant some peaches, pears, plums, cherries, all of those things. Stick some trees out there, and that is an investment in your future. It's an investment in your ability to separate even more down the line. So think about that. But all of the things that every day when you get up and you watch the news, whether it's the craziness like the shooter up in Coeur d'Alene. Did I mention we were just up there like a little over a week ago? And, it's weird because we had just left Salt Lake City when the riot started in Salt Lake City, and then we're up through Seattle, and they got crap going on up there, and then we were up in Coeur d'Alene, and now they got this thing in Coeur d'Alene, and I said, I'm looking at what's the common denominator? Steve Smith was there. I didn't have anything to do with it. I hope. Anyway, so as this craziness comes up, just every day, don't let it make you fearful like a lot of people want you to be, but let it reinforce your understanding, your realization, your acceptance that you need to do something to separate yourself from the system. And then you can still participate in the system. Once you're separate and once you don't need the system, you can still interact with the system. Like I say, hey, if you've got your own power, you can still run off the grid if you want to until you don't need to. If you still want to go to restaurants, good for you. I do. I love going to restaurants. Love going out to eat. I love taking trips. I love the system, to be honest, but I don't depend on it. That's the thing. Okay. Let me give you, I didn't do this at the beginning, and mention to you our sponsor, because this is the ultimate guide for separating from the system. Even more than Atlas Shrugged, because this is talking about real people. And it's my books, my series of books. I don't have all of them here because I had to send some out to fulfill an order. Just sent some out the other day, sending more books out today. We're waiting for the next bunch to come in. The next delivery, I think they said on the 8th. What's today, the 1st? Okay, so we're waiting on that. Anyway, we'll get around to that in just a second. My book's the Stonemont series. The Reversion, the Revival, the Renewal, and Appeal to Heaven, the Blessings of Freedom, Hostages to Fortune. And the very latest one is, it's not a late, it came out a year ago, On Wings Like Eagles. And the latest one will be coming out, I hope, sometime in September. But anyway, I'll talk more about that later. What is this? This is the story of a prepared family who, as a result of their preparedness, having separated themselves from the system, separated themselves from dependence on the system, was able to continue to live well when everything collapsed. And not only were they able to continue living well, but they were able to help other people. Okay? And then help and start rebuilding communities and societies and things like that. It is a great story. It's the whole story in serialized novels, and I wrote them to really educate people about total preparedness, total separation from the system. Okay, you'll love the story. You'll learn more than you can imagine. One of the things that we do, let me back up. You can get them through Amazon. That link's down below. Or you can get them a better way that I really like you to do it, and that's through me directly, and that's through our website, stonemont.us. And if you do that, then I get to sign each one for you and write a note in there for you on each one. We're able to sell it to you as a set, which you can't get through Amazon, and also to give you a discount because we save money when we ship them like that. And then I also throw in for free from me to you the Stonemont notebook in which you can write all of your lessons and your preparedness lists and your thoughts and your questions and everything like that. Now, I do want to warn you about something. If you order them through Amazon, you'll get them quick. If you order them from me, you won't. Okay, we have been running because we have, the last couple of months, we have just been setting record after record after record on orders through our website. And so we have been running a month or more behind on fulfillment of orders. I want to say that up front. So if you want them fast, get them through Amazon. If you want them signed by me and a note written in there to you, and I love it when you do that, because I like being able to see who you are and write your name, to Bob, to Janet, to whatever. I love that. It makes me feel like I have a relationship with you. And then please do it through if you're willing to wait, do it through our website. We'll get them to you as quickly as we can. We've done a couple of things that we think are speeding up our fulfillment process. So we're looking forward to that. But we still are about a month, maybe a little bit more, behind on order fulfillment. So if you don't mind waiting, get them from me. But however you get them. And read and think about how can you separate yourself more from dependence on the system, because that's what real independence is. That's what freedom is. Independence and freedom are not living under the laws and requirements and restrictions of a benevolent government. It's living under the will of God Almighty. Okay, as long as you're living under, or as long as you're relying on the system to provide for your needs, you're in kind of a tenuous position. Okay, all right. Well, that's it for today. I'm going to go back and start writing more on the 8th book, and like I said, I'm hoping to have that done by September sometime, because we have our annual gathering coming up in the Kansas City area on October 4th. And I'm hoping to have the book ready for everybody who comes to the gathering, that I can sign it for them in person right there at the gathering. And so that's my goal anyway. We'll see what happens, right? Okay. Hey, you all have a good day. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. And get out there and work on your independence from the system. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.